Robyn is their primate campaign consultant, and she is dedicated to ending the use of primates in research and brings decades of experience in the anti-vivisection movement. Robyn has a deep commitment to exposing the hidden suffering of primates in Australian laboratories. It's amazing how many people don't know that this goes on. Her talk today is entitled Trapped by Outdated Guidelines, Ending Primate Suffering in Australian Laboratories. Please make Robyn very, very welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm really happy to be here today, on Gadigal land. I'm from the Bunurong country on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, and I acknowledge that these lands were and always will be Aboriginal lands. Yes, you can see the title of the talk. I must mention some images. I've got some images. Most have been taken from publicly released documents now, but there is one image, and I'll give you a warning when it comes up. But it is it's a standard procedure that's used particularly at Monash University, so I have included that image. There it is. So, trapped by outdated guidelines. So today the talk will cover examples of primate use in Australia, the breeding of the primates, understanding a little bit about their sentience, their intelligence. We're telling some of their stories of the individual primates and our campaign strategies and tools for reform that we can all take part in. So just briefly, I am the primate campaign consultant. I work part-time for Animal Free Science Advocacy. We're a small but pretty powerful team. There's 6 of us at the moment and some of us are part-time, but we do punch above our weight, I'd like to say. And our vision is a future where no animals are harmed in the name of science, and scientific progress is advanced through animal-free research methods. But just a little bit about my journey and just how I started, because I think it might be relevant. In 1986, so 40 years ago this year, I saw a letter in the local newspaper, the Frankston Standard, and it was from a lady, I think her name was Mrs. Littlewood, and I kept the article for a little while, but I don't think I have it now. But it talked about, I knew nothing about animal experimentation or anything like that, but it had this little letter to the editor saying that there was to be a toxicology laboratory to be set up in Victoria by the state government where animals, 100,000 animals, were to be used in toxicology testing. Now, toxicology testing is one of the most horrific forms of testing in animals. So I joined the organisations who were fighting this toxicology laboratory, and I have never stopped fighting for animals in laboratories. It's been a passion that will last till my dying day. So I got involved, and from these images you can see that there were campaigns in the streets against Lufthansa, who used to transport primates for research around the country. I spoke at Fed Square in Melbourne, which was just a corner block in Swanston Street then. And you can see there's an article there about the testing facility. There were marches in the streets of Melbourne, and there are marches now, of course, but there were anti-vivisection marches where hundreds and hundreds of people would march. So it was very exciting, and I wish it would go back to that. So the toxicology laboratory didn't progress. We campaigned pretty hard, and also the Victorian government found that they were in dire straits financially at that time, and so the facility didn't go ahead. So today, everything I'm going to tell you and show you fits into one simple pattern. We know enough, the harm is hidden, and the rules allow this to continue. So what we know, just briefly, we know primates are sentient. They suffer pain, joy. They're very social animals. We know their living conditions. and the experiments they're subjected to are horrific. We know where most of the research is carried out in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland on primates. And I might just say here, I am abolitionist. I don't believe in any experiment on any animal. But as a primate campaign consultant, I'm talking about primates today. But this transfers for me to all animals. Thank you. So we also know that alternatives in many cases exist. And they're being developed every day, as we've heard in our previous panel discussions. And we know the public feels quite strongly about this issue. Oh yes, well we believe other states may be contracting out overseas. We know some are definitely contracting out. They might be contracting out primate research in Australia. They may also be contracting out to the United States, other countries, if they're not doing it here. That is, yes, very likely to be the case. We have seen evidence of that. So thank you for that. So yes, their sentience. As we know, the primates do develop very strong bonds. Marmosets are have highly advanced cognitive abilities. There's been a recent study that shows that marmosets recognise each other by their names. They have the ability to name each other and can call out to each other. And they share that with humans, dolphins and elephants, but they're the only species we know that do name and talk to each other like that. So to cover the hidden area, just to let you know, not many people get to see Animal Ethics Committee approvals, let alone activists. Even we don't see much about this. Not many people get to see the standard operating procedures under which these animals are bred and kept. And not many people know about the mortality rates of primates in experiments. And the system relies on this invisibility. So why does it happen? What rules allow this harm? Well, the Australian framework for the use of primates and all animals comes under two documents set by the National Health and Medical Research Council. The NHMRC have a national code for the care and use of animals for scientific purposes. And alongside that, that code doesn't say a lot about primates, but alongside that there are principles and guidelines for the use of non-human primates for scientific research. And that document does talk more about primates, but from its title you can see it's just guidelines. So I'm going to move pretty quickly because I've got such a lot to say. So if I don't have time for questions at the end, because it's lunchtime, feel free to come over to the stall and ask any questions. So who do we use? In Australia, macaques, marmosets, baboons and owl monkeys. So there are 3 breeding facilities. In Victoria, there are macaques and marmosets bred in a facility in country Victoria. There's a baboon facility in Malaysia, in New South Wales. And there are some owl monkeys bred in Queensland at the Department of Defence's Malaria Institute. So Monash University has a licence to hold 850 macaques and marmosets. We think there are about 300 there at the moment, but they can hold up to 850. So I have to glance at my notes, but basically I've said that, and we find this information, so we know how many are at the Malaria Institute due to Senator Faruqi asking a question in Parliament. The baboon facility, Senator Maureen Faruqi has asked how many are there. So what are they used for? The majority of research in Australia is biomedical research. Macaques and marmosets are used in neuroscience and vision and HIV. Baboons here in New South Wales, diabetes, pregnancy, cardiovascular, renal failure, xenotransplantation of cells from piglets to the baboons, and the owl monkeys in Queensland are for malaria and infectious disease research. So So I thought we might look at two publications to give you an idea of what these animals are used in and that information is publicly available. So an example of a research down at Monash University, well at Clayton, but the primates were taken from the breeding facility. Little marmosets were trained to go into perspex boxes. This took a considerable amount of time, and then they were placed in a experimental room where the researchers stood outside the room and they wriggled a toy snake to deliberately install fear into these animals. And then they were observed to see the flight or fight response. The next slide has the awful photo. But this procedure to study the brain meant that the researchers had to undertake, and I will describe it in a minute, a craniotomy to open up the brain and expose electrodes so that they could study the response, the part of the brain for the response of this experiment. Now, the procedure, the animals were anaesthetised, and this is a common procedure, and this is why I am showing the photo and talking about it, because these craniotomies are carried out a lot at Monash on various macaques, marmosets, for various cognition experiments. So the anaesthetised marmoset is placed into a stereotaxic frame, of which I have an image next, and a craniotomy is performed to expose the brain. So the brain is exposed and electrodes are very finely placed onto areas of the brain through a cannula, and a neurotoxin is slowly injected to induce brain damage. Lesions on the brain like this are done regularly at Monash. Now, we referred to the code and the guidelines before. The code does not state that these surgical procedures be carried out by vets. So they're carried out by their researchers or perhaps their students, but not by veterinary surgeons. So that is a macaque who's had a craniotomy. This is image provided to us by Cruelty Free International, and it is a common procedure. That's a stereotaxic frame where the marmosets are held very, very still with poles through their head through their ears to hold their head very still while the injections are placed in the brain. And that is a study that actually explains in detail. There's another example of a research publication. I'm only covering two today. This one is also Monash Cognition Experiments. This is an experiment where marmosets were given a task. They are put in a small perspex cage, and the researchers studied what's called stop-go experiments, so how an animal would inhibit a response. They might start a response, so they had to tap a screen with a certain colour, and then when another colour came up, they had to stop their response. So it was their inhibition, the response. So half the monkeys had oxytocin given to them, which is a drug to reduce anxiety, and it's linked with comfort and security, to see how some of the primates would react having been given this oxytocin. Now, there's some concerning things. So this is the front page of the publication, and this is where we get a lot of information from. This was funded by our friends at the NHMRC, the National Health and Medical Research Council, who also produced the code and the guidelines. And so the researchers would have applied for a grant for this. This publication doesn't actually say what the grant was, but quite often we can trace it back to the project number and find how much, which is usually in millions, how much was provided for the research. The other worrying thing about a publication, you'll often see either at the beginning, like in this one, this is the front page of the publication. This will require further studies it actually says, we will require further facilitate studying the marmoset model. And quite often the publications do say we need to look into this further. We'll need to do more animal studies. Yes, so they've set the scene. Anyway, I know this is very heavy. And I thought, and many of you have been sitting here for, the previous panel discussion. So I just thought, shall we put ourselves inside one of these experiments that I've just mentioned? Yes, thank you. I have my research assistant with me today who might run through the experiment with us. It's just a short interactive reflection of one of these experiments, and don't worry, it's not the one with the snake under your seat, so it's not that one. So you've guessed it's the other one, the stop and go trial. And this is just an exercise that shows how difficult it is to stop an action that has already been initiated. And it's the same principle. We don't have a screen, but Jasmine will talk us through it. It's the same principle as in that laboratory experiment. So I'm going to hand over to my research assistant.
Okay, so when I say go, raise your hand as fast as you can. Sometimes I will say stop after go. If you hear stop, do not raise your hand, even if you've started. When I say hands down, relax and restart. So just have your hands like in yellow, like that. Okay, go, down, go, down, go, stop, down, go, down, go, stop, down, go, stop, down, go, down.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was quite fun. It was a bit like Simon Says. But let's go back to the publication where this is referred to. If we go to page 4 of this publication, we will see that these marmosets in that very similar experiment were actually trained for months and months on end. They were taken into cages and they were trained to go into these perspex boxes, and that took months. Then they were trained to undertake the experiment of touching the screen, and that took weeks and weeks. And in total, it appears about many months in this training. So these little marmosets, the publications, again, never give the name of a marmoset or an animal, but a number. In this case, it's just they were called F, L, J and D. There were 3 females and 1 male. They were aged between 1 and 5 years. I've lost it. So there's a lot behind the publication. If you look into it, you can see what they actually had to undergo. So this is just one experiment, one paper, one set of monkeys. And it's not about pain alone, it's about control. And you can see it's a system. And very poignantly here, Doctors Against Animal Experiments in Germany have said, monkey brain research shows only one thing, how the brain of the studied, traumatised, sick and severely stressed monkey reacts to a certain stimuli in a specific moment. And you can imagine how stressed these animals were. They were only between 1 and 5 years old, so they came from the breeding facility. They would have been taken from their siblings, their family members. For 5 days a week, they were put into this training for months and months. And we know that they can call to each other. I wouldn't be surprised if they were calling out to each other because they were in various cages, and who knows if they could hear their family members. So it was would be a very stressful situation. The worrying thing is, I did a quick search, and there are alternatives to this in humans. There are human studies, many, also testing oxytocin on humans, where people have put their names forward and undergone trials and clinical studies. There are alternatives. And this publication was funded funding according to the publication, with our taxpayers' money. Yet the code that we've heard about earlier requires a formal harm-benefit assessment before an experiment is taken place. Section 2.7 requires the Animal Ethics Committee to weigh up any likely harm to animals against expected benefits, and to refuse approval where harms are not justified by those benefits. And Section 239, Animal Ethics Committee can only approve projects when they are satisfied that replacement has been fully considered. Otherwise, approval must not be granted. So there are so many examples like that stop-go study where we question how that ever got through. If I can do a study and find there are alternatives, surely an Animal Ethics Committee can do the same. So how do we know this? How do we know what's happening behind closed doors? We predominantly undertake freedom of information requests. We're always putting in requests, not just for primate research, but all issues that are concerned to us. And we trawl through the publications put out by the researchers themselves. And because of these FOI requests and publication searches, I can now show you what it's like inside the primate breeding facility in Gippsland. These photos have rarely been seen. They were provided to us under a Freedom of Information request, so today you are probably going to see things that you hadn't seen. And in all my 40 years, I had not seen images in Australia like this myself. It still makes my hair stand on end. So down in Gippsland in Victoria, there's the Australian Non-Human Research and Breeding Facility, where the animals are bred, the macaques and marmosets, and then used in experiments predominantly at Monash. So we sent in an FOI request for the standard operating procedures, such as we asked for the animal care procedures, the housing, the restraint, put in a lot of requests, and surprisingly they came back, but not only with text, but photographs. So this is, and bear in mind, this is a standard that should be observed. This is a housing system, the chronic deprivation these animals are housed in Gippsland. This is their cages. I'll let you look through these. You can see there is a macaque tucked in that corner there. Someone is going up to maybe open the door or feed, I don't know, but all the technicians will always be garbed up because there's great fear of getting a disease from a primate. So it would be extremely frightening to be caged and have someone come up and clean out your cage. That's the cleaning of the cages. The image on the left is a single housing unit. These units, the code doesn't give the size of the cages, but it's not regulated, but these cages are roughly the size of a refrigerator, and that's cleaning. This is a vivarium where the primates are held. This is from the standard operating procedures at the facility, so we know it's in the facility. We asked for handling procedures. That machine on the left is where the macaques go from their cage into this centre area to have their blood pressure taken or blood testing or what have you. Then they move through to the other end. Because it's a breeding facility, there are many babies there. There's a lot of infants, a lot of marmoset infants. The infants are used in experiments. They're used for breeding, but they're also used in experiments. One publication had very many infants used. I haven't brought that along, but I question why so many were used in one experiment. So the standard operating procedures say how to handle these little marmosets. So they're in humicrids sometimes. The standard operating procedures say how to handle them. So the image on the left is a macaque. They're held back like that. Now, if you look closely, you will see that this macaque has a metal collar. The standard operating procedures, and this is standard around the world, these animals, because of the fear of touching them or getting disease, they use a pole and collar method where a pole is attached to that collar and then the animal is swung around to be moved from one part of the facility to another. The next image is a little marmoset, how they are held, restrained. And the third image is the procedure for injecting these animals. We asked for the feeding procedures. This is on the left, the animals eating, and the top image being fed. Now this is you know, in the wild, primates can cover, and I kept a note of how far, but it's like 500 football fields. It's equivalent to about 500 football fields or more. Sorry, lost my notes. But a huge area they cover, and they forage for their own food. They eat fruits and nuts, and but this down in Gippsland is how they are fed. And it also shows the feeding times. So my eyesight isn't good even with my glasses, but it shows that they the hours that they're fed, they don't always get fresh food. Oh, it's easier. But that's the feeding schedule. No fresh food on weekends. We asked for the enrichment. This is the enriched cages. That's the outdoor cage on the left and the right. So I understand that their cages are pushed up to the outside cage where they are able to go outside for this wonderful enrichment in the outside cage. Our other documents have revealed we've put in requests for unexplained deaths at the facilities, the 3 breeding facilities. So in Gippsland, thank you, and the baboon facility in Wallachia and the defence facility. So we have discovered the deaths of these primates at the facilities. Gippsland and Wallachia gave us reports. But the Department of Defence are very intransigent and not providing information. So we are undertaking an internal review and then a wider review into why we haven't been provided the documents, and we will follow it through. We'll get legal advice and continue. We won't accept no if we can help it. So this is an image that came from the unexplained deaths at Victoria. This was a young marmoset, that macaque that had been who had succumbed to bullying, and most of these reports show that these deaths were found in the morning. So we assume that the technicians have gone in the morning and these animals have been found dead, because the baboon facility showed the same. They were discovered in the morning. So this one had died overnight by bullying. The report showed it was bullying. At the baboon facility in Wallachia, we asked for an extended period, but at this stage we've only got a short period. But in that short period of deaths, it was 4 months last year, from March to June, there were 8 baboon deaths in that one facility in 4 months. We are waiting for more details and need to plough through them for the extended period for the last few years. A couple of the deaths were snake bites, so they can't really escape from snakes in the wild. They will call out to each other and climb away. But so there has been a couple of snake bites. There was a death of 1 day old baboon. The defence denied it. So we put in the application, and this is how it comes back, and that's what we're fighting. And of course, this is lack. If you can see, we don't give information. We ask for information. We politely, and then we put in an FOI request. But there is little transparency. There's little oversight. There's few inspections. We saw that in a 10-year period, there'd only been 1 Victorian government inspection of the Gippsland facility in 10 years. There's no monitoring of compliance with that code. It's all institutional self-regulation. Our letters very often go unanswered. They just don't answer our letters. So what do we do with all this information? We look at the publications and we see the numbers. We see the animals that are used. With primates, they get an ID. So there might be 1730 might be an ID number they're given, not a name, and they'll list all the IDs. And then we could see what the animal went through and its number. But we last year launched Honour Me with a Name campaign. So we tracked the individual primates. We wrote a very brief story about their situation and uploaded to our website to let people sponsor an animal, name them, give them a name. So we revealed their true lives, wrote a little bit about them, and attempting to give them back some dignity with your help, with people who have supported them. And they get a certificate and they've named the animal. And I just read through a couple of examples of how the website looks like for the sponsor, or Honour Me with a Name. So M173 was called that in the publication. Simply known as M173, I was a 2-year-old marmoset taken from the National Non-Human Primate Breeding Research Facility in Gippsland and housed in a vivarium. The publication tells how I received an injection in the left hemisphere of my brain. 7 days after surgical procedure, I was killed. An animal ethics committee approved this on me. This baboon was mentioned in a publication with no ID. I was a baboon in a laboratory in Sydney. I was given a high salt diet to study salt sensitivity on my baby. In the same experiment, other baboons that had preeclampsia induced by having their uterine artery cut. Their births were compared with mine. Hypertension is a risk factor for heart disease in humans, but not in baboons. And another one, and this one's familiar to you, NF405. I was born on the 18th of July 2017, but I was found dead on the 10th of July 2020. I could not take the bullying by the other macaques any longer. My father, NM11, was in his cage after being injected with the SARS virus, so he could do nothing to help me. Life was horrible in the breeding facility. I hated it. Now, we could piece together all these research publications and the unexplained death, and NF405 is actually the primate we saw that died from bullying, because that publication showed the number, NF405, then we found the publication, and we pieced it together, and we pieced together the father, NM11. And some good news. This Honour Me With a Name campaign has just been announced in January, has been a project shortlisted for the Lush 2026 prize award for the public awareness category. So we're waiting. There's been some wonderful applicants in that award, but we're very thrilled to have been nominated as a finalist in that. It's quite unique. I don't think any other country has pulled out numbers from publications and highlighted the research to the community. So there, of course, is public opposition. We've had thousands of people sign signatures, and I'm going to tell you about an e-petition we've got running at the moment. The public polls show that the public, 51% are specifically opposed to the use of monkeys in research. There's scientific opposition. Because of the differences, they're genetically close to humans, yet separated by 25 million years of evolution, anatomic differences, genetic differences. Of course, there's the ethical concerns, their advanced cognition skills, and these animals can associate negative experiences they've had before, and they know what's coming. They know what's coming. It's highly invasive. They have long lifespans. There's one publication we saw that the macaque was 23 years old when she died, and they looked into her cage, and the report said, oh, she was hunched over and listless, and so she had been there breeding for 23 years, so decades down there in Gippsland. There are no retirement options. This is something we're pushing for and getting kickback on from the authorities, but this is something we're going to push for because it happens overseas. There's no reason why we can't rehome or have a sanctuary for these animals. So why does it continue? So back to the NHMRC. The NHMRC, in their guidelines that we looked at earlier, states that the great apes are protected from research, the chimpanzees, because of their cognition and that we shouldn't be using them. And yet we now say that all primates should be protected. These macaques, marmosets and owl monkeys and baboons are all left vulnerable. And the NHMRC funds the research, as you could see in that previous publication. This is despite our calls for non-animal research methods, and there are some, and I give some examples there. A recent announcement, the United States awarded $176 million to institutions developing 3D printed organs for human transplants. So we've heard about the xenotransplantation experiments carried out in New South Wales, and yet overseas that amount of money is being put towards alternatives. And another thing is, one of the publications for the xenotransplantation stated by the researchers at the top, we're doing this research because there's not enough donors of organs. So, we can all donate our organs. So the path, 5 minutes, the path to change. I will let you read that rather than me keep going through it. And there is change happening. You might have heard about getting about rehoming or sanctuary. A truck tipped over in the United States carrying macaques from their breeding facility to research. One macaque, Forrest, did find refuge at the popcorn sanctuary in New Jersey. So, it does happen, but we think it should happen everywhere. And I don't know whether you know, but there is the Banana Cabana Primate Sanctuary in New South Wales, in Dural. I visited there. They have a couple of macaques, and I would like to just really briefly read you something from there. But they have a couple of macaques from research, but a lot of other monkeys. So it's a lovely place to visit. This is the arguments you'll hear as to why we should be using animals. Maybe just take a photo because I probably shouldn't read through it if I'm running out of time. But it's very helpful. You'll hear they're treated well, but now you have seen the cages. You can answer having seen these things. Strictest guidelines in the world. They're just guidelines. If we don't stop the research, it'll go overseas. And we've discussed this earlier in our panel discussion. We should be a global leader. This is called ethical dumping, when you send this overseas where it's not as ethical. And we shouldn't be involved in that. I'll tell you what action we can take, and then I might just read to you something very briefly from Susan, the owner of the Banana Cabana. So this is the moment to act. We have the evidence, we have the community support, and we have the tools. Urgency is urgent. It's very urgent that we stop these primate experiments. And why it's urgent is the code is being reviewed. The national code is being reviewed. So we want to get in early, and we don't know how much the code will cover primates and how it will treat those guidelines that we looked at. So we have an e-petition, which we would love you to sign if you haven't already done so. The link is at our stall, to ask the government to give the health minister to give protection to all primates. And when it's tabled, it will go to the health minister, and the health minister will have to make a response. We've written to every politician in the country, members of parliament and the Senate, House of Reps, to tell them about this issue a number of times. And so it's really hot at the moment. So this is the link to the parliamentary petition. If you want to get your phones out and take a photo or do your petition now, it's very easy. You've got to be an Australian citizen. You just have to put your name, you'll get an email, you have to just confirm that email and you're done. And we have 11 days to get as many signatures as we possibly can. There's other things you can do, and come to us at the stall if you'd like to know what other matters you can do and actions you can take to help primates. It's really urgent. There's one other thing. I talked about the toxicology laboratory that was stopped 40 years ago. There's something very frightening about to happen, we fear. That Gippsland facility, we've heard that it's going to be taken over by an international contracting facility. Now, we don't know a great deal, but this is frightening because this international contracting laboratory, our toxicology laboratory, and you would have heard how terrible the toxicology testing is. We were able to stop it, 40 years ago, and I can't believe 40 years on this could happen. We don't really know what they will do, but there is a real threat that this change in ownership is going to go through. And I've got 2 minutes. So this is why it's urgent. And I just read you something from Susan, because I found this I only got this in the last day or two, and I've been to the Banana Cabana, and I thought she had some animals from research, and she did. Dear Robyn, when you visited, I had 3 crab-eating macaques that came to me from a well-known facility that had previously supplied monkeys for research. Little Millie came to us in 2010. I had been told by the facility that she had previously been a breeder. Millie passed away 4 months ago from a tumour behind her eye, which my veterinarians determined was too risky to operate on due to her age. When Millie came to us, she did not have a name. She always had been referred to me when I visited the facility as the old girl. She was just a number, the tattoo on her inner thigh. I told Millie she was a little monkey and her name was Millie, and within a few days she knew her name was Millie. In 2012, 2 young crab-eating macaques, again with only tattooed numbers from the same facility, came to us. Brenty passed away also 4 months ago from chronic liver failure. His brother Benny is going fine. So this is why we're here. We want to get them out. We want your help. We want you to sign the petition. And do anything, just do anything you will recall. 40 years ago, I saw a letter to the editor in the local paper, and I've been fighting this for 40 years. Never think that any action is too small or won't be seen. You just never know where that seed is going to land.